You just walk through your front door. The lock clicks behind you and something in your chest just lets go. Like your whole body was clenched for hours without you even noticing. Nobody treated you badly. Nobody said anything wrong. You were simply around people, and now you feel like you just made it through something. If that sounds familiar, you're not broken. You're not depressed. And you're absolutely not antisocial. But something is happening inside your brain that the majority of people will never fully grasp, because people who genuinely love being alone tend to carry a very specific set of psychological traits that science is only recently beginning to take seriously. And a few of them are going to completely change how you see yourself. Here's the story you've been fed your whole life: that being social means being well-adjusted, that the person with the most connections wins, that if you'd rather spend a Saturday evening at home, something inside you needs to be corrected. Schools celebrate the loudest voices in the room. Workplaces fast-track the people who work every happy hour. Even the apps on your phone are built to punish you for going quiet. And after long enough, you started wondering if maybe everyone else was right. Maybe something actually is off about you. Psychology disagrees, and not even slightly. So before we get into the traits, let's set aside everything society told you about what normal is supposed to look like. Trait 1. Your brain is not afraid of silence. Back in 2014, psychologist Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia ran an experiment that sounds almost too strange to believe. He placed participants in an empty room for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, no music, nothing but their own thoughts. The only other option available to them was a button that delivered a mild electric shock. 2/3 of the men, and 1 in 4 women, pressed that button on purpose. Physical discomfort was genuinely more bearable than 15 minutes alone with their own mind. Now think about what you do with that same silence. You don't reach for the exit. Your brain doesn't start screaming for something to fill the space. It settles. It drifts into places that only open up when everything else gets quiet. Half-forgotten memories, questions you've been circling for years, ideas that have no chance of surfacing through the noise. Psychologists call this elevated internal awareness. Your brain naturally defaults to self-reflection rather than hunting for outside input. You don't require external stimulation to feel okay. And that single trait alone puts you in a very different category from the majority of adults who have never once sat with their own thoughts without immediately reaching for their phone. But that's the surface level. What comes next is where it starts to feel personal. Trait 2. You don't have less social energy. You just spend it at a completely different depth. Most people assume you drain fast because you're somehow worse at connecting. That's not it at all. You drain fast because you're operating at twice the intensity of everyone around you. When you're in a conversation, you're actually in it. You track the pauses, you pick up on what someone isn't saying, you process the emotion underneath the words they actually chose. That requires serious cognitive bandwidth. The person next to you at a crowded gathering is skimming the surface, catching headlines. You're reading the full article every single time. Neuroscientist Hans Eysenck spent decades studying this. People who gravitate towards solitude already run at a higher internal baseline of stimulation. Outside input doesn't charge them up, it overloads the system. Think of it like a laptop with 15 applications already running in the background. Adding more doesn't speed it up, it slows everything down. So your small circle isn't a sign that you failed at something. It's intelligent resource allocation. And that connects directly to something even more specific. Trait 3. You read the emotional temperature of a room before a single word is spoken. You know exactly what I mean. You step into a space, and without anyone saying anything, you already sense who's tense, who's performing, which 2 people just finished a difficult conversation before you walked in. You absorb it all instantly. Not because you're trying to, but because you can't not. Psychologist Elaine Aron found that somewhere between 15 and 20% of the population carries this level of sensory and emotional perceptiveness. Your nervous system is calibrated to pick up frequencies that most people don't even register. Everyone in the room is broadcasting, and you're the only one who can hear every channel simultaneously. That sounds useful, and it is. But here's what nobody talks about. When you're absorbing every signal, every undercurrent, every unspoken tension, all day at full volume, the only way to actually hear yourself again is to step away from all of it. Solitude isn't your escape from the world. It's the way you come back to yourself after spending hours tuned into everyone else. What takes most people years of therapy to even begin to understand, that line between what you're feeling and what you've absorbed from the people around you. Your brain quietly built that boundary on its own, probably before you were old enough to name it. But there's something that almost everyone with this trait tends to overlook. Trait 4. Your mind makes connections that other minds simply can't reach. You know that thing that happens when you're in the shower, or on a long drive, or staring at the ceiling, and suddenly one idea threads into another, and then into a third, and by the time it's done you've assembled something in your head that feels genuinely original? That doesn't happen for everyone. Not like that. Researcher Gregory Feist at San Jose State spent years analyzing the psychological profiles of highly creative people across every field imaginable. The one trait that kept surfacing across art, science, literature, engineering wasn't exceptional talent. It wasn't measured intelligence. It was a consistent preference for working alone. Their minds needed the removal of external noise to access the kind of unexpected connections that produce something new. Nikola Tesla refused to collaborate in groups and credited his long solo walks with generating his most significant breakthroughs. Kafka wrote almost entirely in the late hours of the night when the rest of the world had gone to sleep. These weren't personality quirks. That was the actual mechanism. Every hour you spend in your own company isn't lost time. It's your mind running the exact process it was designed for. And the people who keep telling you to get out more have no idea what they're actually asking you to give up. But we need to pause here, because there's something that has to be said honestly. Not every version of this is healthy, and it's worth being real about that. Do you choose solitude because it restores you? Because your mind operates better when the world gets quiet? Or do you choose it because being around people feels genuinely dangerous? Because being alone guarantees that no one can get close enough to hurt you? One is a preference, the other is armor, and from the outside, they look exactly the same. If your time alone feels like freedom, like you chose it and you'd choose it again, keep going. If it feels more like hiding, like you're waiting for something that never quite feels safe enough, that might be worth exploring with someone you trust. Because the last trait only lands the way it's supposed to when the ground underneath it is solid. Trait 5. You don't collect people, you select them. You've sat at tables where everyone is talking, and somehow the room is completely empty. You can feel yourself starting to disconnect, not because you're rude, not because you don't care, but because your brain ran a quiet calculation and came back with, this isn't real enough to justify the cost. Your mind treats surface-level interaction the way your body treats food that looks fine but isn't. Technically it counts, but your system knows the difference. After enough hollow exchanges, it stops pretending otherwise. That's why your circle is tight. That's why a single honest conversation at midnight means more to you than a dozen polished ones at a party. And the people who actually made it through, they sense it. They know they're there because you genuinely wanted them there, not because you needed a number to feel okay. Tell me, do you recognize yourself more in the people who recharge alone or the ones who go quiet to protect themselves? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. Now take a step back and look at all of it together. A brain that finds silence comfortable rather than threatening. An emotional radar that processes entire rooms without a single word. A creative mind that only reaches its full depth when the noise disappears. An energy system that refuses to be wasted on things that don't matter. And a filter that only opens for what's actually real. That's not a list of quirks. That's not shyness with better branding. That's a completely distinct architecture for being human. And the real tragedy is that most people carrying all of this spend a significant portion of their lives convinced they're the defective one. Too guarded, too particular, too quiet, because no one ever pulled them aside and said, "The way you're built isn't a malfunction. It's the whole design." The world will keep handing the microphone to the loudest people in the room. People will keep asking why you're so quiet, as if quiet is a diagnosis that needs treating. But somewhere underneath all of that, you already know something. Most people spend their entire lives chasing. You know what your own mind sounds like when no one else is in it. You're not broken. You're not missing something. You're just wired for depth in a world that keeps rewarding volume. If this felt like something you needed to hear, please subscribe. There's a lot more to explore. In the next video, it's going to land differently than this one. I think you'll know why when you see it.